Hello friends, please like and subscribe to the channel and enjoy the stories. Chapter 1. The Train to Nowhere. The late autumn sun dipped low over the misty countryside, casting a warm amber glow through the windows of the 6:15 train from Amersham. This was the kind of train journey where everything seemed suspended in time, where the steady rhythm of the tracks whispered secrets of forgotten stories, and the carriage's gentle sway cradled passengers in its lulling embrace. Amelia Sinclair, a 27-year-old illustrator with a penchant for daydreaming, sat by the window in carriage 4. Her notebook lay open on the small table in front of her, its pages filled with whimsical sketches of the passengers around her. A tired businessman slumped against the window. A mother softly shushed her fussy toddler. A teenage boy with headphones bobbed his head to a beat only he could hear. But Amelia's pencil hesitated as her gaze fell on him. He sat diagonally across the aisle, a book cradled in his hands. His dark hair, slightly tousled, fell over his forehead, and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He wore a deep navy coat with a scarf loosely draped around his neck. There was something magnetic about him, a quiet intensity as he turned each page with deliberate care, as if savoring every word. Amelia's heart skipped a beat when his eyes flicked up, catching hers. He smiled, a quick, shy gesture that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and Amelia felt the heat rise to her cheeks. She pretended to be absorbed in her sketchbook, but her pencil betrayed her, sketching the curve of his jaw and the shadows of his thoughtful expression. "Nice drawing," he said suddenly, his voice smooth and warm like honey. Amelia froze. Thanks," she stammered, snapping her book shut. "I didn't mean to interrupt, it's just you captured the businessman perfectly. He always looks that grumpy," he said, nodding toward the oblivious man across the aisle. Amelia laughed, the sound surprising even herself. "I guess I have a knack for grumpy expressions," she said, relaxing slightly. "I'm Theo," he offered, leaning slightly forward. "Amelia," she replied, her voice steady now. For the next 20 minutes, their conversation flowed effortlessly. Theo shared that he was a linguist returning from a seminar, and Amelia spoke of her freelance work and her dream of illustrating children's books. They traded jokes about the quirks of public transportation, and Theo even pointed out a peculiar stop on the train line map called Ashgrove Terminal. "Strange name, isn't it?" he mused. "It's not even on the route, but the sign is always there. Have you ever noticed it?" Amelia hadn't. But now that he mentioned it, something about the name tugged at her memory, like a song she'd once heard but forgotten. The train screeched to a sudden halt, jolting them both. Around them, passengers stirred uneasily, and an announcement crackled over the intercom. "Attention passengers. Due to an unexpected issue, this train will terminate at Ashgrove Terminal. We apologize for the inconvenience." A murmur of confusion rippled through the carriage. "That's odd," Theo said, frowning. "Ashgrove Terminal doesn't even exist." The train doors hissed open, revealing a station bathed in an ethereal silver light. Mist swirled around the platform, shrouding its edges in mystery. The air had an otherworldly chill, and an unspoken unease settled over the passengers as they disembarked. Amelia clutched her sketchbook tightly, sticking close to Theo. The station was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of something mechanical. "Amelia," Theo whispered, his voice tinged with urgency. "Look." She followed his gaze to a worn wooden sign that hung above the ticket booth. It read, "Ashgrove Terminal, Journey's End." Below it, in smaller letters, was an inscription, "All who enter here find what they seek, or what they fear." The platform began to shimmer, and the world around them seemed to shift. The other passengers faded from view, leaving only Theo and Amelia. "I don't think this is just a train station," Theo said, his face pale but resolute. Amelia felt a pull, as if the station itself was calling to her. Her heart raced, but an inexplicable calm washed over her as she met Theo's gaze. "What do we do?" she asked. "We find out," he said, taking her hand. His touch was steady and sure, grounding her in the surreal moment. Together, they stepped forward into the mist. Chapter 2. Echoes of Ashgrove. The mist enveloped Amelia and Theo like a living thing, dampening sound and swallowing the faint glow of the train behind them. The platform stretched on endlessly, though no tracks accompanied it now, just a smooth expanse of cobblestone that shimmered faintly in the spectral light. "This place feels wrong," Amelia whispered, clutching Theo's hand more tightly. "It feels old," Theo corrected, his voice steady, though his wide eyes betrayed his unease. "Like it's been waiting." "For what?" "For us, maybe," he murmured, glancing at the strange inscription again. The silence around them was deafening, broken only by their hesitant footsteps. Amelia's sketchbook pressed against her chest felt like the only tangible thing anchoring her to reality. They reached a narrow hallway beyond the platform, its walls covered in peeling posters from decades or centuries past. Each bore cryptic messages in languages Amelia didn't recognize, though Theo seemed transfixed by them. "Latin, Old Norse, something even older," he muttered, brushing his fingers over the faded ink. "This isn't random. These are warnings, or instructions." "Instructions for what?" Theo didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the center of the hall, where an antique turnstile stood, its brass surface tarnished by time. Above it hung another sign, etched in curling script: "Pass through with clarity, or remain with regret." Amelia felt a chill creep up her spine. "What does that mean?" "Maybe it's asking us to make a choice," Theo said, his voice quieter now. "But about what?" As if in response, the mist swirled around them, thickening into shapes, indistinct at first, then painfully clear. Amelia gasped as she recognized the figures forming in the haze. Her parents, their faces, familiar yet shadowed, appeared with expressions of quiet sorrow. Behind them, a younger version of Amelia crouched in a corner, clutching her knees and crying. It was a memory she had buried long ago, the day she overheard them arguing about their divorce. "Why would I see this now?" she whispered, tears prickling her eyes. "It's not just you." Theo's voice was tight. Amelia turned to him and her breath caught. The mist had conjured another scene, one she couldn't make sense of at first. A child, no older than 6, sat alone on a stone bench, clutching a tattered book. His resemblance to Theo was unmistakable, but the sadness in his eyes was unlike anything she'd seen before. "That's me," Theo said, his jaw clenched. "After my mother left." The mist pulsed as if alive, the images flickering like a dying projector. "It's showing us what we carry," Amelia said. "What we regret." Theo nodded, his gaze locked on the child version of himself. "But what does it want us to do about it?" Amelia approached the turnstile. "Maybe we're supposed to let go." Theo hesitated, then followed. Together, they stepped through. The world shifted again. The mist fell away, replaced by a blinding golden light. They stood in a grand chamber that stretched infinitely in every direction, its walls carved with intricate patterns of stars and vines. In the center, a tall, cloaked figure waited. Its face was obscured, but its voice resonated through the air like a melody and a thunderclap at once. "Welcome, seekers," it said. "Few arrive here, and fewer still leave unchanged. What is it you seek?" Amelia's voice trembled. We don't know." "You do," the figure replied. "You seek freedom from what binds you, but freedom comes at a cost." The chamber dimmed, and 2 doorways appeared before them. One glowed softly, radiating warmth and familiarity. The other was dark, its edges flickering with shadows. "One path will return you to your lives as they were," the figure said. "The other will lead you to a new existence, but not together." Amelia's heart dropped. "Not together? Why?" "Because you are bound by what you carry," the figure replied. "Only by releasing it can you truly move forward. Choose wisely, for this choice is final." Theo turned to Amelia, his expression unreadable. "What do we do?" She searched his face, her mind racing. The pull of the familiar doorway was strong, but the thought of losing Theo, this strange, serendipitous connection, was unbearable. "I don't want to lose you," she said, her voice breaking. "Maybe we won't," Theo said, though his tone lacked conviction. "Maybe if we choose the same door," but the figure cut him off. "The doors reflect your hearts. Your choices may align, or they may not. You must choose without knowing." "Amelia's isn't fair." "Life rarely is," the figure said simply. Time seemed to slow as they stepped toward the doors. Theo turned back once, giving her a small, sad smile. "No matter what happens," he said, "thank you. For this." Amelia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, too." They crossed the threshold simultaneously, and the world dissolved into light and shadow. When Amelia awoke, she was back on the train. The 6:15 from Amersham rattled along as if nothing had happened. Her sketchbook lay open on her lap, but the pages were blank. She looked around frantically, searching for Theo, but he was gone. The businessman was still asleep. The mother soothed her toddler. The teenage boy bobbed his head to his music. Had it all been a dream? Her heart sank until she noticed something tucked into her sketchbook. A single, folded page torn from a book. On it was a sketch of Theo, smiling gently, and a note in his handwriting. Some journeys never truly end. Chapter 3. The Residue of What Remains. Amelia's fingers trembled as she unfolded the page. Theo's face stared back at her, a perfect likeness sketched in her own hand. Or was it? She didn't remember drawing it, yet the lines were unmistakably hers. The note at the bottom anchored her, but also left her reeling. Some journeys never truly end. The train's rhythm, once soothing, now felt oppressive. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the compartment again, her mind grasping for anything out of place, anything to explain what had just happened. Nothing. The businessman stirred in his seat, letting out a groggy sigh. The mother bounced her toddler on her knee, whispering a lullaby. Life continued as if Ashgrove Terminal had been a figment of her imagination, but the sketch in her lap said otherwise. Amelia clutched the page and rose from her seat. She needed air. Moving toward the junction between carriages, she slid the door open and stepped onto the narrow platform. The wind rushed past, cool and biting, but it cleared her head. She unfolded the paper again, staring at Theo's face. Who was he? She wondered. And where had he gone? As if in response, a faint voice whispered through the rushing wind. Amelia. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. The carriage behind her was empty, its lights flickering faintly. The voice came again, softer this time, but unmistakable. Amelia. Her grip tightened on the sketch as she stepped cautiously into the empty carriage. The air here was different, thicker, charged like the moments before a thunderstorm. The faint scent of pine lingered, oddly comforting. At the far end of the carriage, something glimmered. A door. It wasn't a normal train door. It was made of polished wood. Its surface carved with intricate patterns of stars and vines, the same patterns she'd seen in the chamber at Ashgrove Terminal. Amelia hesitated, her pulse pounding. The train jolted, and she stumbled forward, clutching the door frame. The handle was cool beneath her fingers. Without fully understanding why, she turned it. The door opened into a small room bathed in golden light. It was warm, almost inviting, but eerily still. At its center stood a wooden table, and on it rested an object that made Amelia's breath catch, a book. Its cover was leather, worn and soft, with the same curling script embossed on its spine, Ashgrove Chronicle. She approached slowly, her footsteps echoing in the silence. When she reached the table, she hesitated, her fingers hovering over the cover. Something told her that opening the book would change everything. But curiosity won. The pages rustled as she flipped to the first one. It wasn't a typical book. Instead of text, there were illustrations, vivid, lifelike sketches. The first page showed Theo as a child, sitting on the stone bench she'd seen in the mist. The second showed her parents, their faces locked in a heated argument. The third page stopped her cold. It was a drawing of her and Theo, stepping through the turnstile at Ashgrove Terminal. Their hands were clasped, their expressions resolute. "How?" she whispered, her voice shaking. The pages turned on their own, faster now, the images blurring together. Amelia caught glimpses of scenes she didn't recognize. Her in a bustling city, sketchbook in hand, Theo speaking to a crowd in a grand hall, the two of them laughing together in a sunlit park. Then the images stopped. The book fell still, open to a blank page. A single line of text appeared, written in the same curling script. "To find him, you must remember." "Remember what?" she asked aloud, her voice echoing in the empty room. The golden light dimmed, and the room began to dissolve around her. She clutched the book to her chest as the floor vanished, leaving her suspended in a void. When Amelia opened her eyes, she was no longer on the train. She was standing on a narrow cobblestone street lined with tall, crooked buildings that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. The air was cool and fragrant, with the scent of pine and something sweeter, like honey. In her hand, she still held the book. Its cover now bore a different title, The Search for Ashgrove. "Amelia," a voice called. She turned sharply, her heart pounding. Standing a few feet away, Theo smiled at her. He looked exactly as she remembered, glasses slightly askew, scarf loosely draped. "You made it," he said, relief flooding his voice. Amelia's legs moved before her mind could catch up. She ran to him, throwing her arms around him, her grip tight and desperate. "I thought I lost you," she said, her voice muffled against his coat. "You didn't," he said, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. "But we're not done yet." "What is this place?" she asked, looking around. "It's Ashgrove," Theo said. "The real Ashgrove. And this time we're going to finish what we started." The cobblestone streets stretched ahead, filled with flickering shadows and glimmers of light. Side by side, Amelia and Theo began to walk, the book clutched tightly between them. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time Amelia felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Chapter 4. The Map of Ashgrove. The streets of Ashgrove buzzed with an energy that was neither hostile nor inviting. It simply was. The buildings seemed alive, their windows glimmering like watchful eyes. Signs in unfamiliar languages hung from wrought iron posts, swaying in a breeze that didn't exist. Amelia held onto Theo's arm, her grip firm but trembling. "What do you mean by the real Ashgrove? I thought it was just a train station." Theo gave her a rueful smile. "So did I, until I walked through one of those doors." "You've been here before?" she asked, her voice rising with disbelief. "Not exactly," Theo said. "I dreamed about it, ever since I was a kid. I thought they were just nightmares or strange stories my mind was making up, but now I know those dreams were real." Amelia stared at him, trying to process his words. Before she could respond, a soft hum filled the air. The cobblestones beneath their feet began to glow faintly, forming patterns that spread outward like ripples on water. Theo stepped forward cautiously, and Amelia followed. "It's reacting to us," he said, his voice tinged with awe. The glow coalesced into a symbol at their feet, an intricate circle with intertwining lines that pulsed with a golden light. From its center, a path of light extended, leading into the distance. Amelia glanced at the book in her hands. Its cover shimmered faintly, as if in sync with the cobblestones. "I think this is a map," she said. Theo looked at her, then at the glowing path. "A map to where?" "I don't know," Amelia said, "but it feels important, like it's the reason we're here." The two exchanged a look, then began to follow the path. The glowing trail led them deeper into Ashgrove, where the streets grew narrower and the buildings taller. Strange figures flitted in and out of the shadows, humanoid shapes with features that seemed to shift like smoke. They watched silently but made no move to approach. "Don't look too long," Theo warned, noticing Amelia staring. "Why?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "They're echoes," he said. "Fragments of people who didn't complete their journeys. If you focus on them, you might get stuck too." Amelia swallowed hard and kept her eyes on the path. "How do you know all this?" Theo hesitated. "The dreams. They weren't just dreams, they were warnings." The glowing path ended abruptly at the foot of a massive oak tree, its branches sprawling into the sky. Its trunk was gnarled and ancient, its bark etched with more of the strange symbols that seemed to be everywhere in Ashgrove. At its base was a door, small, arched, and made of the same polished wood as the one Amelia had opened on the train. "This has to be it," Theo said, stepping closer. Amelia followed, her pulse quickening. "What's behind it?" Theo shook his head. "I don't know, but the dreams always ended here." Amelia tightened her grip on the book. "Then we go together." Theo nodded, and together they pushed the door open. The door swung inward, revealing a chamber bathed in soft golden light. Unlike the infinite expanse from before, this space felt intimate, almost sacred. In its center stood a pedestal, and on it rested another book, identical to the one Amelia held. Above the pedestal, words shimmered in the air. "Choose what to keep and choose what to leave behind." Amelia's chest tightened as she read the words. "It's the same as before," she whispered, "letting go." Theo stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the pedestal. "But letting go of what?" The room seemed to respond. Images flickered in the air around them, moments from their lives, captured in perfect clarity. Amelia saw her younger self, sitting alone in her childhood bedroom, clutching her sketchbook like a lifeline. She saw herself turning down opportunities, retreating into the safety of her art instead of risking rejection. Theo's images were equally vivid. A young boy standing at a window, waiting for someone who never came. A teenage Theo, burying himself in books to escape the pain of his fractured family. An adult Theo standing alone at train stations, always moving, but never arriving. Amelia's throat tightened. "These are our regrets," she said. Theo nodded. "And we have to leave them behind." "How?" He reached for the book on the pedestal. As his fingers brushed its cover, a glowing thread of light extended from it to the book in Amelia's hands. "They're connected," Theo said, his voice filled with wonder. "We have to do this together." Amelia stepped closer, placing her book beside his on the pedestal. The two books fused into one, their covers shimmering before splitting open to reveal blank pages. The shimmering words above the pedestal shifted. "Write what you will carry forward." Amelia looked at Theo, her heart pounding. "What does that mean?" "I think," Theo hesitated, then smiled softly. "I think we're supposed to write what matters most, what we don't want to lose." Amelia picked up the pen that appeared beside the book. Her hand hovered over the page as she thought about everything they had seen, everything they had experienced. Finally, she wrote, "Hope." Theo took the pen next and wrote, "Connection." The book glowed brightly, its pages turning rapidly until it closed with a soft thud. The light in the room dimmed, and the door behind them creaked open. Amelia turned to Theo, her heart pounding. "What now?" He smiled. "Now we see where the path takes us." When they stepped back through the door, Ashgrove was gone. They stood on the edge of a sunlit field, the air crisp and filled with the scent of pine. In the distance, a train whistle sounded. Amelia glanced at Theo, her heart steady for the first time in what felt like forever. "Do you think we'll ever come back?" "Maybe," Theo said, his voice thoughtful. "But for now, I think we've got everything we need." Hand in hand, they turned toward the sound of the train, ready for whatever came next. Chapter 5, Through the Threshold. The field stretched endlessly before them, golden grasses swaying gently in a breeze that whispered of distant places. The train whistle grew louder, its echo tugging at something deep within Amelia's chest. She tightened her grip on Theo's hand as they walked, her mind racing with questions she couldn't yet voice. Behind them, the door to Ashgrove had vanished, leaving no trace of the cobblestone streets or shadowy figures. The golden light of their journey now felt like a dream, the kind that lingered even after waking. "It feels like we've reached the end of something," Amelia said, her voice quiet. Theo glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "Or the beginning." The train came into view, a sleek, silver locomotive that seemed impossibly modern against the pastoral backdrop. It sat motionless on a single set of tracks, its doors open as if waiting just for them. "No station," Amelia murmured. "No need," Theo replied. They approached cautiously, the air around the train humming with an energy that prickled their skin. A conductor stood by the door, his uniform crisp and pristine. His face was calm, serene, and utterly unreadable. "Tickets?" he asked, his voice smooth and melodic. Amelia hesitated, glancing at Theo. "We don't have tickets," she said. The conductor smiled faintly, as if he had expected her answer. "You've already paid the fare," he said, stepping aside to let them board. Inside, the train was nothing like the one they had left behind. The compartment gleamed with polished wood and brass fixtures, its seats upholstered in rich, midnight blue velvet. A faint, lilting melody played from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Where does this train go?" Amelia asked, turning to the conductor. "Forward," he said simply. Theo gave her a small nod, and they took their seats near a window. As soon as they settled, the train began to move. The landscape outside shifted rapidly, as though the train was traveling not just through space, but through time and memory. Forests melted into deserts, deserts into bustling cities, and cities into vast oceans that sparkled under an endless sky. "It's beautiful," Amelia said, her voice filled with wonder. Theo was quiet, his gaze fixed on the horizon. After a moment, he said, "Do you think this is real?" Amelia turned to him, startled. "What do you mean?" "All of it. Ashgrove, the paths, the doors. Even this train," he said, his brow furrowed. "What if it's all in our heads?" She considered his words, then shook her head. "Does it matter? Real or not, it feels true, like it's exactly where we're supposed to be." Theo smiled faintly, his tension easing. "You're right, it does." As the train sped forward, a soft chime rang through the compartment. The conductor appeared again, his serene expression unchanged. "It is time," he said, holding out a small envelope. Amelia took it hesitantly, her fingers brushing against its smooth surface. The envelope was unmarked, except for a single word written in elegant script. "Decision." "What does it mean?" she asked. The conductor didn't answer. Instead, he bowed slightly and stepped away, leaving them alone once more. Amelia opened the envelope, revealing a card inside. The same two words that had haunted them in Ashgrove were written there. "Choose what to keep and choose what to leave behind." Her stomach tightened. "We already did this," she said, looking at Theo. "Maybe it's not about our regrets this time," Theo said, his voice steady. "Maybe it's about each other." Amelia's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Theo took the card from her, his expression serious. "This journey started because we met, because we stepped into Ashgrove together, but maybe now we're being asked if we want to keep going together, or if we're meant to part ways." Amelia's mind reeled. The thought of losing Theo, of continuing without him, was like a physical ache, but beneath the fear was another emotion, hope. Hope that whatever choice they made, it would lead them to where they were meant to be. "What if we choose differently?" she asked softly. Theo smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. "Then I guess we trust that we'll find each other again. Somehow." The train began to slow, the world outside the window coming into sharper focus. A small platform appeared, surrounded by mist and bathed in soft, golden light. Amelia and Theo stood, the card still clutched in Theo's hand. "I think this is where we decide," he said. They stepped off the train together, the mist curling around them like an embrace. Two paths stretched ahead, their ends obscured by the fog. One led into a dense forest, its trees towering and ancient. The other climbed a gentle hill, where the faint outline of a city shimmered in the distance. Theo turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "No matter what happens," he said, "thank you, for everything." Amelia's throat tightened, but she nodded. "Thank you, too." They stood at the crossroads, the card in Theo's hand glowing faintly. Slowly, the light split in two, forming identical cards, one for each of them. Amelia took hers, feeling its weight. The words on it shimmered briefly before fading, leaving only the single word, "Choose." When Amelia stepped forward, she didn't look back. Her heart ached with every step, but she trusted the path beneath her feet. She trusted Theo. As the mist swallowed her, she clutched the card tightly, its warmth a reminder of the journey they had shared. And somewhere on the other path, Theo walked too, his steps steady and sure. They didn't know when or where their paths would cross again, but deep in their hearts, they carried the same unshakable truth. Some journeys never truly end.